Okay, I think we're ready to go. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar where we will be discussing the benefits of an AWS optimization and license assessment for Windows Workloads migrations. We'll also be sharing a customer case study at the end as an example. Priscilla, next slide. So today's webinar is a combined effort between iOCO and AWS. We have got Jade Quinn that will be presenting the benefits of an OLA assessment. Then I'll hand over to Margaret Canu that will explain to us the benefits of Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. And then I'll be discussing the case study of where we've actually used these two features or products from Amazon in a real life scenario. Just a reminder that the webinar is recorded and we'll be able to share a link with you after the event. We've also got two technical experts in the background that can answer your questions as we go through the webinar using the Q&A functionality on the webinar. Jade, with that, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Morning, everybody. It's really great to be speaking to you today. So my name's Jade Quinn, and I'm an optimization and licensing assessment enablement manager here at AWS. It's really my role to make sure that all of our customers, end customers through partners and direct customers know about the OLA and really the benefits that it brings to you and your journey to cloud. So I'm going to take you through some slides today to help me explain that. Can we have the next slide, please? So you're going to hear me refer to the assessment as OLA. That stands for Optimization and Licensing Assessment. The assessment has two key components. The first is standardizing the TCO analysis. We use tools and our methodology to create a TCO, and we right size the infrastructure costs within that TCO before presenting it back to you as a customer. And iOCO is going to show you and talk to you about an example of exactly how they've been using this process to do that with their customers. In addition to the optimization of the infrastructure, which is really the O of the OLA, we then apply expert licensing advice, the L in OLA. And what that enables us to do is provide an assessment back to our customers, which is data-driven, based on your data, your infrastructure, how you're using that infrastructure, and your licensing entitlements, to be able to make decisions about your journey to cloud and how you want to move to the cloud. Based on this assessment and how we've been delivering this back to customers, we see 58% of our customers then migrating to AWS post this assessment. And not only do 58% of them move, they do it 34% faster. And that's because you will have the information and the data that you need to make a decision, a confident decision that AWS is the right cloud for you, and then you will be able to do it faster. You'll be able to see key workloads that will provide you with quick wins or increase your security posture, which will motivate you to migrate faster. And not only that, our customers see an average of 62% savings by taking this assessment, by looking at what your costs are on premise versus what they would be in AWS once right-sized, once you've taken in consideration utilising licensing entitlements, and also commercial solutions that are available, things like reserved instances. And last but not least, this assessment is completely free of charge to you as our mutual AWS and iOCO customer. Not only is it free of charge, but we also don't expect you to make any commitment to AWS to take the assessment. It really is a great way for you to kind of start exploring your options and building out a business case to move to AWS. Can we move to the next slide, please? So This assessment is for any customer that has a workload that isn't on AWS yet, that would like to understand what it would cost for that workload to be moved to AWS. So if you're a current spending customer with AWS and you've got something left on premise, this may be a perfect assessment to understand what it would cost for that to be moved. If you're completely new to AWS, that's also great. You know, use the assessment to understand what your cost would look like in the AWS cloud. No matter where you are in your journey, if you still have something left to migrate, we understand that there are challenges with assessing those workloads, and this list is definitely not exclusive. But you know, we've got some of them here, so understanding exactly how much it's going to cost in the AWS cloud, you know, it can really be a finger in the air if you don't have a data-driven assessment to help you answer that question, and that's absolutely what the OLA will provide you. What are the options for modelling out different purchasing scenarios? So we have online simply monthly calculators available to help you make that calculation. However, that requires, you know, manually inputting every single instance. And if you have several VMs still on premise, that can be really time consuming and complicated. So the assessment is also going to allow us to quickly model out different purchasing scenarios, whether that's looking at your instances being on the shared tenancy, on the dedicated host, whether you want to reserve instances or pay up front. We're able to do that really quickly within the tools that we have available to us to help us all save time. And then moving on, we have what are my options for using existing licensing entitlement. So at AWS, we absolutely don't want you to be spending any more money than you need to, and we absolutely want you to be utilising any investments that you currently have that you're able to bring to the cloud. So if you are a Microsoft licensing customer today, we want to understand what your entitlement is so that we can factor that into your AWS TCO. It can really make or break a business case if we are not factoring in a current investment, and we're really here to help and provide advice around the best way to utilise any licensing entitlement that you have. And then the last point here is, why is Azure saying that it is 5 times more expensive? So, you know, there is a lot of inaccurate marketing out there, or marketing that isn't 100% transparent. Our assessment helps remove all of the FUD, all of the fear, uncertainty, doubt about any of those types of claims. And as I said, it's going to do that in a data-driven way to help you understand exactly what the TCO would be, and put any fears of those kind of statements to bed. Can we have the next slide, please? So I mentioned in the previous slide that one of the things that we are, you know, focusing in on is Microsoft licensing. Specifically, we're looking at Windows Server and SQL as we're, you know, we're looking at infrastructure TCO. So they're, you know, the most predominant Microsoft products that you would be looking to utilize and move to the cloud. And I've just got an example here to highlight the impact that licensing can make from a commercial perspective. So modelling out on a monthly on-demand cost for one C5X Amazon EC2 instance in the US East region, just as an example, when we look at taking that instance with Windows Server and SQL Server Enterprise included, the monthly cost is $1,357 US per month. When we downgrade that SQL edition to standard, that reduces by over 50% down to $610 per month. When we remove the SQL altogether, it reduces down to $259 per month. So you can quite clearly see here from this example the costs associated with Microsoft licensing. So if you are a user of SQL Server, we absolutely want to make sure you are using your entitlement to avoid, you know, your TCO being overinflated. By bringing your own license in this situation, you're automatically, you know, removing nearly $1,100 worth of cost per month on one instance. And they're the kind of things that we're going to highlight to you as a customer to make sure that that TCO is really accurate. And what you'll find in many cases is we actually reduce your SQL requirement to less than what you are actually using on premise today. So on average, we reduce SQL calls by 49% compared to the on-premise requirement. And we do that by looking at a few different factors. Firstly, we are right sizing. It's very common for customers to have oversized pieces of tin on premise so that it's future proofed for growth, etc. Of course, in the cloud that is not needed because we have the availability to scale up and down as and when. So by right sizing, we can automatically reduce that requirement. Secondly, we have a really cool feature within AWS called CPU optimization, which enables us to remove the hyperthreading on a per instance basis. You could require quite a large instance, maybe for storage reasons, which automatically comes with a high CPU count. If that's not actually needed, we're able to turn that off, reduce the CPUs to the actual required core count, and therefore reduce your licensing requirement. And last but not least, you know, hosting that SQL in the cloud comes with benefits instantly, things like high availability, you know, the ability to run DR in through things like Cloud Endure. So it may be that you were able to down edition from enterprise to standard and receive, you know, benefits by down editioning. So really important topic. If you're a SQL user, it can instantly give you some quick commercial wins without doing any kind of upgrades or modernization. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So technical challenges. Not only do we have some challenges around kind of moving to the cloud and understanding like baselines, there are technical challenges when assessing these workloads as well. So in some cases, there may be some confusion around what licenses can actually be brought to the AWS cloud rather than repurchase them through a license included model. I kind of mentioned a few you know points on that on the last slide there, that we want to make sure you're absolutely using what entitlement you have. There are different AWS deployment options, whether that's shared tenancy or dedicated host. Depending on the deployment option, there are different licensing strategies that we need to consider, and we will help you as your trusted advisors understand which is the best suited for you in your project, and also what's also going to be compliant for you. You know, there's no point us presenting a low cost, bring your own license solution if you don't have the correct licenses to take that option. We also want to reduce calls on instances, as we mentioned before, which is automatically going to reduce those licensing costs without any further technical modernization. And last but not least, the rules regarding licenses, specifically Windows Server and SQL, are set by Microsoft and other software vendors, you know, things like VMware or Oracle. They're determining the situational requirements for using your entitlements on our cloud. And we have experts in the different vendors that you would want to bring to the AWS cloud to be able to provide the advice on the best way to bring each one of those. And that's all part of the assessment, which is completely free of charge. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So you may be thinking what you're actually going to get as part of this assessment. And to summarise, what we're going to deliver back to you via iOCO is cost projections for running your Windows and Linux workloads in AWS. So we are absolutely focused on these Microsoft workloads. That's where we want to dive deep and give you specific extra information and support. However, we understand that most customers will have an estate with a mixed OSs. So if you have Linux as well, we're absolutely going to right size that and include that in your TCO calculation. We're going to optimize the number of SQL core licenses and let you know what that requirement is to bring to the AWS cloud, so that it's really clear and transparent around the licensing costs and requirements. And then we're going to provide data which is going to allow you to pivot from the assess phase, which, you know, the assessment is all about. It's about assessing what you have, creating the baseline, and then moving on from there to look at how you can then mobilize into your migration. So that data is going to be there and available to you to take away and start planning those next steps. As we said, it's absolutely no cost to you. The average cycle for an OLA is approximately 6 weeks from when you give us the go ahead, and we can then release the inventory software to you. 6 weeks from then is when we are in a position to present back the data in a tailored presentation back to you as our customer. Next slide, please. And how we get there is through 3 key steps: collecting, analysis and planning. I'm going to dive into these 3 stages into a little bit more detail over the next 3 slides. So if we could have the next slide, we'll talk about how we collect the information. So if you want to take advantage of the OLA, the first thing that we need to talk about is the tooling that we use to collect this information. We use either AWS's Migration Evaluator, that's owned by AWS, or we do have a third-party tool, Cloudemize, which we also use quite regularly. These are our top 2 preferred tools. These tools will be deployed via an agent or agentless collector onto your infrastructure. However, they only are looking at server level utilization data and software edition and version. So they're non-intrusive, and we have plenty of documentation to share with you around the security processes and policies that these tools have in place, and also regarding the installation method, etc. If there is a reason why we can't deploy an agent, maybe you are in a current change freeze, maybe really struggling with bandwidth and prioritizing an installation right now, but you have your own data to be able to share with us regarding your utilization. If you can share that with us, we can look to ingest that data as well and create a TCO that way. It's definitely not our preferred approach, as it doesn't give us the level of accuracy as an agent. However, it's a great starting point to start building on that business case. So if we could move on to the next slide, we'll talk about how we then analyse the data that we collect. So the tools that we use, our preferred tools, actually will create the right sized instance recommendations. They will process the data on our behalf and match your on-premise instance to a right-sized AWS instance based on the utilization. We can also optimize the number of cores within these tools and model a combination of on-demand or commitment options. So, you know, as I mentioned before, one of the great things about the tools is that they're going to save us time and also be able to do these calculations really accurately, as there is no room for human error. And then once we have completed the analysis, we can then move forward to the last phase. If we could move on to the next slide, please, which is planning. So once we've presented the cost model back to you and we've shared the data, it's then there to be able to start building that business case, and you're able to start planning your migration with iOCO and plan your first move group or your proof of concept. That OLA is going to provide that data to help you identify which application or workload should be in that first move group. And that is the assessment in a nutshell. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. Before I hand over, the last thing that I just want to talk to you about is Gwinty Cytometrics. So Gwinty Cytometrics is a customer based in Iberia that we delivered an OLA to last year. And I just want to share this case study with you today. It's a great example of how the OLA has benefited Gwinty. So to give you a little bit of extra background here, this was a customer with around 50 servers, and they were looking to understand what their costs were going to be if they were to move to the AWS cloud. They were actually struggling with bandwidth and were needed to make a decision really quickly. And because of that, they actually provided data to AWS for us to ingest and analyze on their behalf. And that enables us to provide a TCO back to them really quickly. We applied industry standard benchmarks to that data to optimize it because we couldn't see the actual utilization. And that basically showed them the potential savings that they would be able to make. So, you know, as I said, we want to use this assessment to share data with you so that we can start to build a relationship with you as our customers, and you can start to understand how we work as a you know, a virtual customer team for you, AWS and iOCO, on with your journey to cloud. And that's exactly the experience that Gwinty Cytometrics received. And once they had their OLA, they were actually able to understand how they could control their costs, and they were able to receive cost reductions of around 18 to 20%. And ultimately, you know, the end goal for them was for them to be able to migrate to AWS and scale up and down as and when they needed, so that they had the freedom to focus on innovation. And that was the ultimate business benefit for them. So as you can see, great example of how the OLA has helped this customer in very early stages of their migration to get to their ultimate goal. So that's everything from me today. I will check out the chat and the Q&A and see if there's any other questions that are outstanding, but I'm going to hand over to Margaret now.
Thank you, Jade. Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Canut, and I lead storage go-to-market strategy for emerging markets at AWS. It's really my pleasure to be with you today and talk about the challenges and solutions around Windows file storage. As our time together is not unlimited, let me get right to the essence of what we'd like to share with you today. Well, I think we can all agree that file data is pretty much everywhere. It's rapidly growing and almost never shrinking. A lot of this data is unstructured data in the form of office documents, media or engineering files. They are stored in user shares and application data. This data can additionally be a part of media processing environments, database backups, content repositories for application data, or archive data needed to be retained for compliance purposes or simply company policy. And it's often spread across multiple storage silos in multiple locations. Next slide, please. Well, customers keep telling us that managing on-premises file storage comes with a specific set of challenges, regardless of the technology being used. Well, number one, it needs to be properly sized to meet your storage needs for the next 3 to 5 years. As the data volume continue to grow, the infrastructure costs, including hardware, networking, data center costs, and physical considerations such as space, power, cooling, aging disks, they also follow the trend. Of course, there are additional costs for software backup, there are warranty renewals. So we also know that on-premise storage is also limited to your immediate capacity. And this not only affects the amount of data you can store, but also the amount of compute that can access the data. And if the storage can't keep up with your applications, your users won't be able to do it either. And how about the features you need, such as replication for disaster recovery? You quickly find out you need to pay more and more just to enable the basic features. And on top of the challenges of managing the hardware, customers also have to manage software, including installing the operating systems, file system software, applying updates, managing licenses, backups, security, and the list can go on and on and on. Next slide, please. Well, it poses a much needed question, what's the alternative? And the answer is simply move to managed file systems. Let's briefly go through the key reasons for considering this move. Reason number one is that your hardware and software are being fully managed. Reason number two are increased agility and scalability. And reason number three is flexible pricing and performance options. Next slide, please. So the solution we are talking about today is FSX for Windows File Server, which is a fully managed service that was launched in 2018. So it's been around for about 3 years. It's designed to serve all Windows workloads requiring file system storage and built on Windows Server, so it's 100% Windows file system compatible, which means you get all the features from your on-premises Windows file system. We surely integrate natively with your on-premises Active Directory and namespace servers, which makes it easier to deploy. And since it's fully managed, you no longer have to worry about setting up servers, installing OS, provisioning multiple storage volume, configuring file systems, and keeping this infrastructure maintained and backed up. So you have a choice of deployment in single availability zone or multi-availability zone to best fit your environment. And as most of you are probably aware, AWS has an established region in South Africa since 2018. It consists of 3 availability zones. And just to clarify, AWS region is a physical location around the world where we cluster data centers and we call each group of those logical data centers an availability zone. Each of our regions is architected with multiple availability zones to protect data durability and service availability. So going back to FSX, we offer multiple storage tiers, which makes it easy to pick the right storage performance for the right cost for each of your needs. We have optimized cost with an SSD tier and also HDD tier, allowing for storage starting at 1.3 cents per gigabyte per month for a single availability zone, and 2.5 cents per gigabyte per month for multi-availability zone. You can actually further reduce your storage cost by approximately 50% by taking advantage of our native data deduplication capability. And you can obviously provision for what you need now and scale as you grow while only paying for what you need when you need it. And please keep in mind that with AWS, you get global availability, making it easy to reach your users and customers across the globe if you are in such situation, and you don't really have to worry about setting up and managing new data centers remotely and all associated issues with that. Migration of your data is quite easy and seamless without disruption to your applications and users. And there is really no need to re-platform or re-architect your applications. And by using standard protocols, you are able to have the same experience managing your AWS storage as you do when you manage your on-premise storage. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to briefly highlight 3 use cases for FSX for Windows, which hopefully you will find useful. The first one is the user shares. Many organizations have home directories and team shares. These companies typically need shared access to common data sets with hundreds or thousands of users. And you can use Amazon FSX for Windows File Server to create a file system that is accessible by up to hundreds of thousands of users and establish permissions at the file or folder level. You can easily move existing home directory file shares to Amazon FSX by using another service called Data Sync. Also, if latency is an issue, you may want to take advantage of FSX File Gateway, which we recently released and which enables you to get the on-premises caching feature. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick real-life example of such use case, ENGIE is one of the 2 biggest utility companies in France and operates globally in the fields of energy transmission, electricity generation and distribution, and this includes natural gas, oil, nuclear, and renewable energy. With the past provider, ENGIE experienced difficulty in managing and scaling the Windows file storage for the 4,400 users at 30 different sites across Europe. They wanted to avoid replacing the aging hardware and move to a better file storage solution that was easy to scale as the users and overall file data were growing quite fast. ENGIE ended up easily moving to Windows storage and they ended up moving to the fully managed FSX for Windows File Server, which enabled them actually to scale in minutes without additional hardware or changes to the existing environment. And with the HDD storage option, as cost was the concern, NG was actually able to reduce their cost by 83% and as a bonus increase performance for the users. Next slide, please. The next use case is focused on application data and whether it's a line of business application, content management, test and development. We all know that many Windows-based business critical applications and workloads such as ERP or CRM or other custom applications require shared file storage provided by Windows-based file systems and use the SMB protocol. As already mentioned, FSX is built on Windows Server and it provides you with the compatible Windows features and performance that your applications require from a file system. And by providing fully managed Windows file storage with features like Microsoft Active Directory integration and automatic backups, you can easily migrate to file-based applications to AWS. For instance, content management and web serving applications like Microsoft Internet Information Services or WordPress store and serve file for websites and internal portals. And these applications use shared file storage because multiple web and content servers typically need access to the same files. FSX is ideal for these workloads because it provides a file system that can be accessed across thousands of instances simultaneously. Next slide, please. One of the companies, one of the customers that had similar use case and has implemented FSX for Windows is Emirates. Emirates is actually world's 4th largest airline by revenue, the so-called passenger kilometers, and the 2nd largest in terms of freight volume. Emirates group actually consists of 2 entities, Emirates Airlines and also a ground services company that operates at 126 different airports. Emirates was in the process of migrating the business critical booking engine from on-premises to AWS cloud and needed high performance, stronger security and reliable shared storage for the content management systems. FSX for Windows file server turned out to be just a perfect fit for that. The migration process was quite smooth and enabled Emirates to easily provision file storage for the content management system, which stored shared files for the booking website. FSX removed the complexity of managing the file-based workloads, significantly contributed to an uplift in performance by the whole 37%, which translates into 37% reduction of service response time and 12 seconds improvement across search pages, and also ultimately better user experience, improved reliability, and increased scalability across the environment. Next slide, please. Let's move on to use case number 3, which is highly available SQL. So SQL Server failover cluster instances have been traditionally quite difficult to deploy and manage, and with the multi-availability zone file system option, FSX provides fully managed file storage that enables the high availability and durability that is required to run business-critical Microsoft SQL Server database workloads without the need for enterprise licenses. This allows you to switch to the standard edition and save on license cost. FSX automatically will handle the data replication and failover and basically simplify shared storage to host your database deployment while reducing your cost. Next slide, please. One of the customers that has just done that is GE Avio, which is a GE aviation business and operates in the design of, design and manufacture, and also maintenance of civil and military aeronautics subsystems and systems like turbines, transmissions, and quite a few others. It's headquartered in Italy and has additional plants in Czech Republic and Poland. Their challenge was to upgrade their SharePoint site, which hosted several critical applications, and they required a highly available environment and lower costs. With FSX for Windows, GE Avio managed to simplify the Microsoft SharePoint deployment, and by switching from SQL enterprise licenses to standard licenses, actually reduced cost by 60%. Next slide, please. So let me close with a brief summary of key benefits, which are listed on this slide for your reference, and a couple of highlights to take away. If you decide to migrate to Amazon FSX, there will be no need for you to modify your existing applications or user workflows. As already mentioned several times, we integrate with your Active Directory. You can use your existing access control lists, DNS names, and share configuration. And you don't need to change file versioning settings or your storage quotas. You can also simplify the actual migration process by leveraging storage and data transfer services that are fully compatible with the features and functionality you need. I'd like to highly encourage you to get in touch with your our local partner iOCO and explore whether FSX for Windows is the solution that fits your requirements and can simplify the way you run your Windows environments. Thank you very much for your attention, and please enjoy the rest of the session. I will now hand over to Paul Venter.
Thank you, Margaret and Jade, for that insights. What I would like to do now is to show you in a real world, or in a real live scenario, what we've done for one of our customers recently using the OLA program, and then also deploying Amazon FSX for them and the benefits they received from that. So towards the end of last year, it was the last week of November, if I remember correctly, we got a referral from AWS to assist one of their customers in the financial services industry that had been dabbling with AWS, testing a couple of workloads, and they've decided that they wanted to do an all-in migration onto AWS because they had their secondary data center, that they used for disaster recovery scenarios. The hosting contract came to an end at the end of February. So that left us with 3 months to do a migration for them onto AWS. Next slide, please. But that also obviously comes with a couple of challenges. They've already wrapped their heads around moving from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, which I think is in a lot of scenarios, a bit of a challenge for people to get their heads around. Like I've mentioned, they've ran a couple of tests and made sure that they could see the benefits from running their workloads on AWS, and they've tested a couple of their systems. The biggest thing is, what would the cost implication be? They've got buy-in from the executives that they can move to the hyperscale platform, but they weren't sure what it would cost to migrate all their workloads and what it would look like. Next slide. And that is where the AWS Migration Evaluator, the tool that they chose to use for the OLA assessment, came in very handy. So the customer actually deployed the Migration Evaluator on their own. They ran the collection tool for 2 to 3 weeks, and then we started helping them with a bit of cost modeling. So I think one of the key benefits for an AWS Migration Evaluator is that you get a right-sized migration from day one, which means is that we've seen what your actual usage is. We match that to the EC2 instances that you should deploy on AWS, and that leads to a cost optimization and a huge amount of savings from day one. What it also does is that it simplifies the cost modeling, because there's so many different options on AWS. It is sometimes difficult and very time consuming to explore all your options open to you when you do migrations. One of the key things in this migration was and what was highlighted to us by Migration Evaluator is that the customer should deploy dedicated hosts instead of the EC2 instances that we all default to, and try and optimize our cost using reserved instances or cost savings plans. Next slide, please. So I think one of the biggest things that stands out for us here is by using AWS dedicated hosts, they could realize a saving of $5,200 a month compared to running the workloads on Amazon EC2. That is obviously due to the cost savings by using the current license, Windows OS licenses, instead of paying for it again, like highlighted by Jade earlier. What the Migration Evaluator also highlighted for them is that they've got about 34 zombie servers. Now, zombie servers are classified or explained as servers that are not being used, or that there's very little activity, but they're running, and it happens in most organizations that you spin up a server, leave it running for a while, you don't need it anymore, but nobody bothers to go and shut those servers down. That will be a massive loss if you had to go and migrate these to AWS. And I mean, that would have been costing them an additional $3,300 a month. So on top of using the dedicated host, we could still apply compute savings plans for them, and that reduced their cost even further. As luck would have had it, during the migration, or when we started the migration, I think it was about the second week into the migration, the Amazon FSx service was launched in the Cape Town region. So they could leverage, because they had quite a number of file servers, so they could migrate all the data from those file servers onto Amazon FSx, and they could decommission those file servers. To date, they've moved just over 9 terabytes of Windows files onto Amazon FSx with a cost of about $450 a month. If we look at the example that Jade showed earlier, what the cost of a Windows server is, that runs into the region of about $260 a month, depending on the EC2 instance size, and that you can see is quite a significant saving by leveraging the managed service from AWS that leaves you with no maintenance overhead or anything. You can just consume the service, and this service is scalable and grows as you require more storage. Next slide. So I think to summarize is that there are so many different options to consider when we're migrating workloads to AWS. And the programs like the OLA makes it easy for us to get an indication of what the actual cost will be once migrated onto AWS, but it also takes out the guesswork and highlights the savings that we get from day one. Instead of running your workload for 3 to 4 months, see how it performs and then starting to optimize. So again, a little bit of planning upfront will not ensure for just a smooth migration, but it also lead to a great cost saving.